The webcast will now begin. Right. Welcome, Baradar. Good morning. Welcome to this meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee. My name is David Stewart. I'm the chair of the committee. It's being held on the 27th of July, 2022. The meeting is being webcast with the exception of any business that the council resolves to exclude the press and public because of the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined by the Local Government Act 1972.
Thank you. Just for the information of people who may be viewing the webcast of this meeting, the members of the committee who are present in the chamber, Mr. Paul Witham and Mr. David Stewart, who are independent lay members of the committee. Attending remotely, Mr. Nigel Rudd, independent member of the committee, Councillor Elfed Williams and Councillor Ellie Chad. Also present in the room is myself, Monitoring Officer Gary Williams, and also representative of Audit Wales, Mr. Gwilym Berry, and the Chief Internal Auditor, Bob Chowdhury.
Thank you. I think the next item is any apologies for the meeting. I've had two sent to me from Councillor Hugh Evans and Councillor Justine Evans. I don't know if there's any more.
I'm not aware of any other apologies,
okay.
Chair. No.
Thank you. I think the next point, the appointment of a vice chair.
Chair, Councillor Ellie Chard is indicating.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I beg your pardon, Ellie.
Sorry, and of course I was trying to get on to not mute and then also stick my hand up. Councillor Carol Holiday. I spoke to her yesterday and unfortunately she can't attend. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think the next item is appointment of vice chair. To appoint a vice chair of the Government and Audit Committee for the ensuing year. I don't think we did it. Well, we didn't do it last time, so I think it's something that we need to do this time. Gary, do you want to?
Yes, just for clarity, the Local Government and Elections Act has made some changes to the Local Government Wales measure in terms of who can be chair and vice chair. So the Act is quite clear that the chair of the committee can only be one of the independent lay members. The vice chair of the committee can be any member of the committee, provided that they are not a member of the council's executive, i.e. cabinet. And since council some years took the decision that we wouldn't appoint cabinet members to this committee in terms of, if you like, more openness and transparency, then it's open to any member of the committee to be nominated as vice chair.
Do we have any nominations for the post of vice chair?
If there are no nominations for the post of vice chair, then I think you'd have to defer the matter to a future meeting. Somebody needs to be nominated and seconded.
Yes.
And if there are no nominations, then we'll have to proceed to another meeting in order to be able to elect the vice chair.
Okay. If you could bear that in mind before the next meeting, please. If someone was willing to be vice chair, I mean, I hope I don't run under a bus in the meantime. I'll get abducted by aliens, but we might need a vice chair.
The other thing to point out, Chair, is that both the chair and the vice chair of this committee also sit on the scrutiny chairs and vice chairs group, which is an important group that deals with the business to be allocated amongst the scrutiny committees and this committee. So it's not just a question of being vice chair of this committee. It is an important role in terms of the sort of operation of the scrutiny arm of the council.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Right. I think the next point, next item on the agenda, 3, any declarations of interest. Members are asked to declare any personal or prejudicial interest in any business identified to be considered at this meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Members will be aware of the requirement under the Council's Code of Conduct to declare any personal or prejudicial interest in respect of any business to be considered at today's meeting. Such interest should be declared now or as soon as the councillor affected becomes aware that they have a personal or prejudicial interest in today's business. All members declaring an interest are required to state clearly what the interest is and to advise whether it's a personal interest or a personal and prejudicial interest as defined in the Code of Conduct. Any member declaring a prejudicial interest is required to leave the chamber for the duration of the business and can take no part in the proceedings. Members with a personal interest only may take part in the debate and any vote. If a personal and prejudicial interest is declared today that has not previously been disclosed and recorded, the councillor concerned will be required to complete and sign a declaration of interest form, which is available either from committee support staff or online.
Do we have any declarations? No, right, thank you. Paul, Witham, did you want to raise something about declaration of interest and its relation to the in the context of the code of conduct? For
Yeah,
members?
thank you, Chair. I understood that all members, lay as well as lay and co-opted as well as elected, had to sign up to the code of conduct, not just declare interests as and when they arise. Now, I don't know, obviously, whether elected members have signed up to the code of conduct, but clearly for co-opted and lay members like ourselves and members on the standards committee who are responsible for policing this, and I don't want to fall foul of them. I would like to think nobody does. I would like to see if we can get the signing up of all members to the code of conduct addressed, please. Thank you.
All elected members have signed the relevant documentation on induction. Apologies for the oversight. The paperwork will be sent to all independent lay members if they've not yet had it, so that they can complete it and send it back.
And that will include co-opted on standards committee and elsewhere.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Gary. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Okay, to move on. Okay. Next item is any urgent matters. Those items which, in the opinion of myself, should be considered at the meeting as a matter of urgency pursuant to section 100B for the local government act 1972. I'm not aware of any.
I've not been made aware of any urgent matters, Chair, now.
Okay, thank you. The next thing is to go on to the minutes. Agenda item 5, to receive the minutes of the Governance and Audit Committee held on the 8th of June 2022. I suggest that we go page by page. So I'm going to read out which page, and if you've got something you want to say on that page, if you could raise your hand in the normal way. Page 7. Page 8. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. It concerns this matter of Queen's Building and contingency. Within that paragraph, it makes it clear that there are two separate discussion items. Now, I noticed from the forward work programme that project management of Queen's Building is on the 25th, is down for the 21st of September. And then on the 23rd of November, there's Queen's Building contingency report. Just for the point of clarification, I suggest that that item on the 23rd of November is not described properly. In essence, there were two issues related but totally separate. The Queen's Building project, we wanted to report to how the work had progressed and the contingency had been used specifically in that project. The more general one of contingencies, which is the one referred to in November, was totally unrelated to Queen's Building. It was simply to say that we had had an example of where, dare I say it, apparently extra spending had been pushed through against a contingency which hadn't been used elsewhere. This was on the Loggerheads car park, as I may have mentioned last time, and it was a general comment that if capital is being managed, capital expenditure is being managed, is it against, as it were, the gross cost, including the contingency, or the net cost, and can the contingency be used to put things back, which, shall we say, were desirable rather than essential. It was, in essence, a totally different area, but applied to individual projects. I hope I've made that clear.
Sorry, Guy, what's the procedure if there's somebody who's wanting the...
Steve Gadd's got his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Steve, beg your pardon.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, Bordar Pawb. Yeah, I just agree with that comment. I think that's right. The two completely separate issues. Queen's Buildings around the audit report. The capital item is a report that was requested pre-COVID. And then when obviously COVID hit, we reviewed the forward work programme, and the previous committee agreed to pull that so that they could get through all the necessary work in the time available. And at the last meeting, Paul recommended that report go back on the forward work programme. So yeah, I'm happy with that change if that helps.
Thank you, Steve.
We can make that change to the forward work programme. So we would describe it as capital projects contingency report.
Okay, thank you. That was page 8, page 9, page 10. Just something, a small point on page 10. The bottom paragraph, it says the Chief Internal Auditor stated he had raised questions relating to the results of the surveys received. This is to do with the internal audit surveys. I think I think that was in response to a question from Nigel Rudd. I don't know if he needs to say that.
The House style of minutes is we don't necessarily tend to attribute each question to each member. We just confirm what the answers were, if you like.
Okay.
It's trying to shorten the minutes.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. And I think also on that same point, at the top of page 11, sorry, anything else, members, on page 10? On page 11, the top of page 11, it was the same point, really. I thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, members, and hope for a higher number of surveys returned. He informed members, I thought it to be sent, the idea was that the surveys to be sent after audits are completed rather than at the end of the year. I thought they were going to move towards that.
We were going to go quarterly, well, 6 months start and then quarterly afterwards, so September time, December, and then March.
Amended there to say that, please. Yeah. Okay, anything else on page 11? Page 12? Page 13? 14? 15? The only thing I wanted to raise on page 15, the third paragraph from the top, it was stressed that a training session was being scheduled. Can we just pursue that? I don't think anything wrong with the minutes there.
No, apologies, Chair. We've had a bit of a nightmare with dates, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I have asked for diaries to be certainly mine to be cleared where necessary to get a date in before your meeting in September in order that we can run the training. But I think Bob and Steve and I have got a meeting in August to try and sort that out as well.
As far as the content of the training, I mean, as members, can we input to that? I mean, I don't know what sort of training members would want there. I mean, I think personally, I think we need some general induction training about the skills and about the processes of the committee and the skills that we as members need. But I think as well as training, I mean, presumably, I think it was mentioned separately last time. I think we need some specific training on the statement of accounts and maybe on treasury management. I think that was, and that's mentioned later on in this morning's agenda. So I don't know.
Certainly the anticipation is that it would be induction training in the first instance, which would touch on some of those things, and probably following that training for you to identify what more you want in respect to those things, then we can provide bespoke sessions about that. WLJ has produced, I think, some materials which will assist in the induction training, right. And we'll also be inviting colleagues from Audit Wales to participate in that as well.
So I'd suggest to the committee members, if there's anything you want to raise it now, or perhaps to if there's anything you want covering, perhaps can contact Gary or myself as chair, and I'll pass it on to Gary. If there's anything you would particularly like to be covered in the induction training or any more specific training issues, if you contact either Gary or myself, if that's okay, Gary. Yeah, thank you. Okay, are we okay to accept the minutes? Yeah, can we move? Sorry. Yeah, can someone move that the minutes are correct? Sorry. Any charge? Yes. And Paul seconding. Sorry, a bit rusty since last time with the procedures. Sorry. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda, agenda item 6, Audit Wales report springing forward. to consider the Audit Wales Bringing Forward report and subsequent management response. And there's a copy attached to that report. Who's going to share on this? Gwilym, thank you, Gwilym.
Thank you, Chair. Gwilym Berry from Audit Wales. This report was done with three main aims in mind. Firstly, to gain assurance that the Council was putting in place arrangements to transform, adapt and maintain the delivery of services as you came out of the last wave of the pandemic. Secondly, to explain the actions that the Council is taking both individually and partnership to strengthen its arrangements, as well as further embed the sustainable principle, which you have to do. It's a duty under the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. And finally, to inspire the Council and other organisations to further strengthen their arrangements through capturing and sharing notable practice examples and learning and making appropriate recommendations. So we undertook the work at the start of the year, and there were a series of overall conclusions, which I'll just run through very briefly, and some recommendations. Just bear with me a moment. The overall report concluded that the Council is actively developing its new ways of working project, which will lead to changes in the long term in both its building assets and its workforce. Integrating this activity with wider strategies and looking further ahead, this will strengthen the Council's consideration of the Sustainable Development Principle, which basically says in a rather long way that we think you're on the right track and that you've still got lots to do, which is understandable, and that you do seem to be considering the Sustainable Development Principle, but there's perhaps more work to be done. Obviously, we couldn't look at all aspects of the Council as it's coming out of the COVID pandemic, so we picked two areas to look at which we thought were critical, which were assets, asset management and your workforce. And in terms of your asset management, you're developing new ways of working, a new strategy, but it's still a work in progress, and that will be incorporated into a new corporate asset management plan that will set out the future for your building assets. Understandably, like a lot of councils, you're not rushing into this because we are still in a pandemic. You know, sadly, the latest statistics showed that there's over 500 people died in the most recent week that we've got statistics for from COVID. So COVID hasn't gone away, and you've adopted a cautious approach, which is perfectly understandable. We felt that officers supported by your councillors are proactive in the management of your assets at the moment. And although that we did identify in the report some ways you could improve processes and consistency of asset management, we basically thought you were on the right track. And also in terms of assets throughout the pandemic, senior managers and cabinet members have carefully monitored the impact of COVID-19 on the council's building assets. In terms of your workforce, our report concluded that you do have workforce planning arrangements in place, but you'll need to further develop these, primarily because you've got to make these decisions about what you're going to do with your assets in the long term. And you can't really take that forward completely until you've decided how you're going to be delivering services, what assets you need to deliver services in the long term, once hopefully the pandemic is finally behind us. We felt the council's actions in respect to workforce planning are largely focused on the now for understandable reasons, and that will be the case until you properly identified your future workforce needs and then take actions to deliver a new workforce strategy. So council is focused on dealing with current day-to-day challenges, and you haven't yet set out your longer term actions to address its ongoing workforce challenges. But as I've tried to emphasize before, that's perfectly understandable, and probably if you'd rushed into making decisions about getting rid of buildings and going down a particular course, you might find a year or two from now that you've perhaps not made the best decision. So we fully understand where you're at. And then there are a series of recommendations, which I would like to think are straightforward. In terms of the final part of this piece of work, to inspire you, which I'm not sure we ever inspire you, but at least we try to be helpful and suggest a few places where people are doing some good things which are worth looking at. Obviously, we can only do that. We're doing this piece of work at all 22 councils. I think Ddinbych was the first council where we completed and published the report, which is largely down to the cooperation of officers of the council here. So it's going to be a while before we've completed publishing the reports at the other 21 councils. And what we will probably do is hold some kind of webinar type event where we'll try and bring together what we've learned from all the other councils. So you'll have to wait a bit to be inspired by us, I'm afraid. The action plans added to the report, which addresses all the recommendations we've made. I don't know if anybody from the council wants to come in there and talk you through the action plan.
Any officers? Nicholas, sorry. So I'm struggling to read the name on the screen. My eyes are on
That's okay. Borodar Pawb.
Thank you.
So I'm Nicholas Stubbins, Corporate Director of Communities, and I chair the New Ways of Working board. So it's under the New Ways of Working board that we have a number of work streams. One is around facilities and assets, another around HR and workforce matters, and there are other aspects to that programme board as well. The responses to the management report within your packs has in the main today come from the two leads for those work streams, Gary Williams and Steve Gadd, because this report from Audit Wales focuses very much on facilities and assets and HR matters. It will be the New Ways of Working board that oversees the progress against the management action plan that is within your packs. I think it's fair to say, having heard Gwilym's response, we are taking I think what we would consider a cautious response that is in consultation with our staff. And it's really important that for every step forward that we take, we consult staff and wider partners to ensure that there are no adverse impacts of any of the actions that we might take. So we welcome the report and our response to that is here today. Gary and Steve, I'm sure, will be able to respond to any specific questions to that. But I wanted committee to be assured that we will continue to monitor the progress of that through the New Ways of Working board. Diolch.
Thank you, Nicola. Does there, any other officers want to come in there, Gary?
No, just to confirm that work's going on under the work streams in respect of flexible working policy, etc., and workforce planning, but happy to answer any questions that members may have.
Members, do you have any questions? Nigel?
Thank you, Chair. Morning, William. Two questions from me. The first to Audit Wales. I found the Exhibit 1 at the start of the report quite a useful document, William, and I just wondered whether, as we try and move generally to better acquaint the cost of local government's workforce against council tax and what the taxpayer is actually getting for their money, whether it's possible on an individual local authority basis to get down to a cost per individual rather than a cost per general workforce, so that there's an element of comparison across authorities and also a more meaningful link to the local community in terms of what it is that the council tax pays for. That's the first one. The second one might be for Nicola or Gary. Within the document, there is talk about the chief executive's rearrangement of corporate resource and the bringing in of 2 corporate directors rather than 1. Can you please set out with a degree of a bit more detail the timeline for that being implemented across the workforce, bearing in mind Nicola's comments about consultation and what's likely to change during the course of the coming municipal year? Thank you, Chair.
Any officers want to respond to?
I'll come back on that one. I'm not sure, Nigel, I actually agree with you on that, because if you just had a crude figure which had the average cost of a council employee per council, it's a fact that the 22 councils aren't all exactly the same. Good example is housing. Denbighshire's got a housing department. Housing department staff are in rather short supply because you're competing in Denbighshire with the local housing associations, who, for better or for worse, pay their staff an inordinately much higher salary than local government. The chief executives of your little housing association in North Wales are on a staggering amount of money, which is more than the council chief executive gets paid here in some cases. And that filters down through the organisation. So there, straight away, you've got an example where, you know, the Denbighshire Council and the other 11 councils who retain the housing stock, they're having to compete with these housing associations with their very high salaries, which they pay. So I can't prove that, but I wouldn't be at all surprised to find that the 11 councils, for instance, which have housing departments, because you're talking about a large number of people in housing departments when you've got council housing stock, that they'd probably be higher. That wouldn't mean that Denbighshire was more inefficient, if you equate inefficiency with the cost of salaries. I'm not sure I would, than say Conwy, but where Conwy's transferred its stock, so it doesn't have to pay the higher wages to get housing staff. And there are a number of other things too, which could lead to a misleading picture, I think. That's my this is not the view necessarily of Audit Wales, my personal view. I think that would be, in my personal opinion, a mistake, but that's just my view. But it's an interesting idea, but that's my initial thoughts.
Yeah, Chair, if I can come back on that, and I wasn't convinced myself, William, in terms of how it might be done. And it sounds to me, unless there's a whole load of safety sort of guards put in around how the data is massaged, not massaged, you should never massage the data, but how the data might be used in relation to a question like that is difficult, from what you're saying, to get down to it on an individual sort of account level on the basis of attempting any comparison. So I accept the cautious negativity on that. So.
Thank you. I think, Nicola?
Yes, could I ask Nigel, please, to repeat the question, because my signal broke up partway through. So I understand you were asking about the chief executive's restructure.
I was asking about the timeline across the workforce and how the initial decisions made by the chief executive and then presumably the ripple effect that occurs within the organisation about the change of direction and the new focus for the council, how that's going to impact on the workforce during the course of the coming municipal year.
So phase 1 of that restructure has now been completed, and that is the recruitment and appointment of the 2 additional corporate directors. They start in post on the 1st of September. Work has already begun with the chief executive team and with our senior leadership team to now start to begin the second phase of that, which is around the heads of service and the SLT. It's anticipated that that entire review will be completed by the end of March next year. So that is work in progress, as I say. In terms of what is the impact, that's something that we're monitoring very closely. We do have a number of members of the senior leadership team who are in interim roles. There are both positives and negatives to that. Obviously, negatives is in terms of capacity, Positives are that we are very fortunate within Denbighshire to have very good middle managers from which to have those development opportunities, and we're very successful at internal recruitment and internal promotion. So that is something that should be seen as a positive. So it's work in progress, and no doubt there will be updates provided by the Chief Executive as that phase 2 moves forward. Diolch.
Chair, if I can come back with a supplementary on that. Nicola, I'm mindful of the comments in Gwilym's report about the common problem faced by councils across Wales in recruitment challenges. From my perspective, therefore, the speed with which rollout of reorganisation takes place can aid or hinder workforce recruitment if you continue to operate a number of acting or interim arrangements pending other decisions being brought in. So looking at the capacity of the council as a GAC member, I would be saying or advising that from my perspective, I need to be assured that the capacity of the workforce is not compromised by delay in terms of changes following restructuring decisions. And there is a balance clearly with consultation, but it is very easy to see how a ripple effect might lead to delays in recruitment, pressures on staff, the lack of capacity to complete what we want to do in 22, 23 and on for the next 5 years. So I give you that back as a perspective that might, bosses may wish to take that away, but from my perspective, that's where I'm looking at it from a GAC member view.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree, Nigel, which is why it is included on our corporate risk register. And it is something that, we are very mindful of. There is, as you say, a balance to be struck between rushing something and doing something properly. There's also a timing issue. We're not the only public sector body to be looking at its senior management team or looking to potentially recruit to senior management positions within the organisation. So it's important that any work that we take forward is done in a strategic way that puts Denbighshire in its best position moving forward. What we don't want to be doing is competing at the same time with 3 or 4 other organisations, albeit I would strongly advise that Denbighshire is the best place to work, and therefore, we would stand up very well against that. But we want to have a good run at this, and it's important that the Chief Executive's vision is able to be delivered by that structure. So it's important we get that structure right.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Ellie Chard.
Morning all. Appendix 1, and it's page 13. This is me picking up on things during reading, browsing through the reports. It was interesting to read that many teachers worked at home during the pandemic. And I was quite shocked about this, but then I realised I do know lots and lots of teaching assistants. That's some of the teaching assistants worked in schools. Now I know they were probably supporting our families and maybe the children of nurses, etc., etc. But I agree that you state that the council should consider how it communicates the rationale for its decisions. And I was just wondering, and it says here about to minimise some of these cultural challenges. I mean, I understand that some of the, majority of the TAs were going into work, and maybe some of the teachers did have health issues, but I was quite shocked really reading about it. So I just thought I'd bring that up. Okay.
Thank you, Harry. Does anybody want to respond to that? I think that's more an observation than a question, I think, yeah. Any officer response to that? Or any other questions?
Chair, I'm happy to respond.
Yes, sure.
So So I think it's fair to say, Councillor Chard, that the staff that were working in person on site were providing support to what we called our hub schools. So they were children, not necessarily from that individual school, they may have travelled from other areas, and it was a mixture of different age groups and different children, obviously children of key workers. What our qualified teachers were doing was the remote learning for their classes, their year groups, their subject groups, and so on. So that was easier to facilitate from working from home than working from a school environment where they were actually supporting and teaching a mixed group of pupils and therefore unable to deliver the curriculum in that way. So I don't think we were necessarily, we were responding to the needs that presented themselves at the time. So the need to have physical staff to support the children in the hub schools is different to the need to deliver the curriculum to specific year groups and specific subject groups. And therefore that's why different staff were required to do different things. Does that make sense, Ellie?
It certainly does. And thank you, Nicola, because I think other people reading the report would have been mystified, because I thought, hang on, the teacher's got 30 children and she's at home. But yes, yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions or observations on this report? No? I just raised one myself, please. It's just on in response. It's more in response to recommendation 4. I suppose it's for Gwilym. This really talks about recruitment and retention of talent. Are there any known good examples of this that we know in local authorities, in the local government world? I'm talking not recruitment, but the retention of talent. I can think of several private sector examples. I just wonder if there's any good local government examples anywhere that we know of. It'd be just useful to look at.
I'm afraid I'm going to try and dodge that question because it's very easy to put that in a report. What we will aim to do, as I said earlier, was when we have finished this work and published our reports at the other 22 councils, we will be hopefully have found some good examples of recruitment, innovative ways. Clearly, it's a challenge for Denbighshire, as it's a challenge for all 22 councils increasingly. It's what's worked in the past. This is part of the problem. Isn't necessarily working going forward, and it doesn't look as if that's going to change. And the challenge of recruitment across a range of services, a range of posts, it's a growing problem. I think throughout Wales, it varies as to what the challenges are. I mean, I gave the example of housing services. You know, clearly, if you haven't got a housing service, as half the councils in Wales don't have, you haven't got that particular challenge. But especially in many of the areas that Nicola is responsible for, adult social services, children's social services, there are challenges which seem to be getting more and more of an issue. But we will try and identify some good practice and some innovative ideas when we finish looking at the rest of Wales, and we hold this webinar sometime later on this year.
The question for myself. Thanks, Gwen. The other question for myself was, as far as the management response is concerned, and to recommendation 3, has any count or is account being taken of any possible benefits of collaborative working with other local authorities or other public sector bodies? I'm sure I know that some goes on, but expanding that, I think this is more a question for the officers, really. I don't know, perhaps Nicola.
Yes, so an example of that is that in the last few weeks, colleagues from Betsy Cadwallader University Health Board have actually taken some space in Caledrin, and they've moved a team of their staff into Caledrin, and we were able to accommodate that because of the availability of the assets that we did have. So that is something that we're very mindful of, something that we're wanting to continue to explore, not only opportunities for the best use of our facilities, but also to continually review, partnership arrangements with colleagues. You'll also be aware recently within County Hall, where some of you are today, of the recent developments around the Registrar's Office and obviously the Coroner's Office as well. And we've also had some elements of social services delivery additionally move into County Hall as well. So I think this is an ongoing thing that Denbighshire has a history of and will continue to explore moving forward. I don't see this as specifically something coming from COVID. It's something we've always done as a point of good practice.
Okay, thank you. I did see some of the things in the report that had mentioned that, and I just thought perhaps COVID has sort of shown some of the advantages of that. It seems to be collaborative working at a fairly low level, like the coroners and registration service that you mentioned, and I think also the provision of vaccination services as well. So, okay, thank you. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. It was really just a general one. How and by whom is this management response going to be monitored?
Good question. Nicola?
Yeah, Chair, I did respond before that the New Ways of Working Project Board, which I chair for the Chief Executive, will monitor the management response within this report going forward. We already have a number of work streams, one of which is facilities and assets, the other which is workforce and HR matters. So this will be overseen and monitored under that group. Diolch.
Gwilym?
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong about this, Gary can probably help me on this, but I thought in Denbighshire that at least on an annual basis, there was a report came back to this Governance and Audit Committee about progress on recommendations from external regulators. Certainly that's the practice at some of the other councils where I'm the audit lead. Some councils do it more frequently than annually, but I thought Denbighshire already had that arrangement in place. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm not sure we have, but I'm happy for us to do that and to put it in the forward work programme, and we'd liaise with yourself and Bob to make sure that we were capturing all those things. Actions from audit reports go on the Virtual system as well, so that we'd be able to pick those up and then report on where we're up to with them.
Thank you. Gwilym, just to make sure I'm understanding it, sorry, I was just writing something down, so I'm one stage behind, but it's really to make sure that we, as a committee, we get assurance that your reports are responded to.
Yes, I would give the opinion that it's not for me to tell the Governance and Audit Committee what to do, but yeah. Yes, I would say that other councils do that. I'm not wishing to clutter up your agenda anymore. I don't think it needs to come every quarter, but certainly I'll give the example of Conwy Council, which I know always annoys you. Every 6 months there's a little report that gets produced, which says not just in terms of Audit Wales reports, but also in terms of reports from Estin and CIW. Yeah, indeed, sure. Yes.
Okay. Anything else? Item. I think we're asked to that we've read, understood and taken account of the content and recommendations in the Audit Wales Springing Forward report. So do we need to ask, can someone to move that? Paul, and someone to second it? Mervyn Parry. Sorry, is everybody in favour of that? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I think the next item is item 7, the certification of grants and returns 2021. I think Councillor Gwyneth Ellis is going to present that. Thank you. Thank you, Gwyneth.
Thank you, diolch yn fawr. Mae Archwilio Cymru wedi paratoi adroddiad sydd wedi hatodi, sy'n nodi crynodeb o'i gwaith o ardystio grantia a ffurflenni'r cyngor ar gyfer 2020-2021. Mae'r adroddiad yma'n cael ei gyflwyno i'r Pwyllgor yn flynyddol, ac mae yna aelod o Archwilio Cymru yma i ateb cwestiynau. Dwi ddim yn siŵr os ydy Steve Gadd yn mynd i gyflwyno mwy o fanylion, ta dyn ni'n mynd yn syth at y cynrychiolydd o Archwilio Cymru eto.
Diolch, Gwyneth. The only thing I'd like to add is just to thank Audit Wales. We work really well with them, really closely with them on this. Obviously, it is their report, so I'm happy to hand over to, I think David's going to go through the details with you.
Thank you, Steve, and good morning all. Bore da. As the member stated, this is a summary of the certification of the grants work which we undertook on the 2021 grant claims. The report starts on page 51 of the agenda pack, and the report summary is on page 54. Paragraph 1 details what the relevant legislation we're dealing with here. So paragraph 20, Schedule 8 of the Government of Wales Act 2006. Paragraph 3 then dates our overall conclusion from the work undertaken. So the authority has adequate arrangements for preparing its grants and returns and supporting our own certification work. The report headlines then are detailed within Exhibit 1 on page 55. So for 2021, we certified 7 grant claims with a total value of £187 million. Timely receipt of the claims, 3 of the 7 claims were received on time. There were some mitigating factors here. 3 of the claims that we certified were pooled budget claims, and this was the first year of certification. So that required additional work from both the council and ourselves in preparing that documentation and certifying it. Those delays did not impact at all on the outcome of the certification process. So in terms of the certification results, we issued 6 unqualified certifications. So that's a clean opinion. There was 1 qualification which related to the housing benefit subsidy, and you will see the various details on that qualification detailed within the report. You can refer to Exhibit 4 for the granular detail there. We also made amendments to two of the other claims, the national non-domestic rates and the social care workforce development return. Those amendments were minor and they didn't have any impact on the funding to be received by the authority or payable to the Welsh Government. So overall, our fee for the work was £53,000, a slight increase on the previous year due to the fact that we certified an additional 3 claims this year. So we were outside our original estimate of £35,000 to £40,000 for the work undertaken. So page 57 then details a summary of the certification work outcomes. You've got Exhibit 2 with key information, Exhibit 3 then with details of the individual claims, when the claims are due and when they were received, and the outcomes of the certification process. And like I referred to earlier, Exhibit 4 then provides some details on the amendments made to the housing benefit subsidy claim. So that's a high-level overview of the certification work undertaken on the grants for 2020-21. Be happy to take any questions on that report. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Do we have any questions from members on this? Nigel?
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions from me. Page 55, 56, when looking at the housing benefit subsidy amendment issue. I was just interested in digging behind that in terms of whether this is a systems issue because of the complexity of compiling data and categorizing it in the way required, or some other matter. And secondly, in terms of housing benefit, what reference, I couldn't see clearly a reference to levels of fraud and how that might impact data, and therefore what and how generally does the council approach housing benefit fraud? Interested in that perspective, please. Thank you, Chair.
Somebody want to respond to that, officer?
Well, David probably can comment on the actual audit findings. As far as I think it's probably a wider issue that if you're interested in, we can bring something back of fraud in general. Obviously, myself and internal audit work really closely with the service. So it's the Revs and Ben service that provides this, which is currently outsourced to Civica and coming back in the autumn. We have monthly meetings with Civica through the operational board, and fraud is one of the things we monitor through that. So it is a key. We are a member of the national, get the right term now, National Fraud Initiative, that we pay a subscription to, and that allows us to help us do cross-referencing to various other data sets, allows us to pick up fraud, you know, across council tax, other benefits. It's an issue that we are aware of and we do look at. Obviously, the other thing just to mention, I suppose, is that our awareness of fraud has also increased over the last couple of years due to the amount of COVID grants, etc., that same service have also delivered on behalf of Welsh Government. So it's become and we have worked really closely with internal audit to make sure that the processes are right at the beginning. So instead of bringing internal audit in, you know, 2 years after the event and picking up things, we ask them for advice and help in actually developing the processes as we go along. So I think that's probably a vague question. I can give you more details separately on the specific issue of housing benefit fraud, but I haven't got the details to hand, so I can get you that if required.
Bob, you want to come in?
Yeah, Steve's correct. We use the NFI data match every 2 years. It comes out and we match every housing fraud in there. So we look closely at all the matches and we go through looking at the case by case. And the second point I'd like to bring up is Steve's correct. Over the last 2 years, we worked very closely with finance and housing, and any grant that's come out, we've been at the forefront. So we've looked at it at the start and during the process, and even now we're looking at the cost of living grants, and we've identified several areas where we've had concerns raised by the departments, and we're now looking into them.
Thank you. Nigel, are you okay with that response?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just go back to the first question about, is it a systems issue where the errors or adjustments are having to be made, or some other cause? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just come in and respond to Nigel here, please. Yeah, Nigel, the question's a good one in many ways. The amount of work we undertake on the housing benefits subsidy is significant, and we do an awful lot of very detailed testing against some very, very strict criteria. And what we're picking up is individual claimants' information and how they've been treated and processed by the council. We're not seeing any overall systems issues. The systems are controlled, but I think due to the level of testing that we are undertaking, we are picking up areas. So you can see the 2 error types which are detailed in the report, where there's been a misclassification of housing benefit expenditure, where individual circumstances have changed, and also insufficient support information as well, where sometimes it's difficult for the council to maintain and keep up to date with changing in circumstances there as well. So it's not a systematic issue, it's individual issues which we are identifying based upon sort of very strict testing criteria set out by the DWP. I hope that provides some assurance there to the question asked.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That's very helpful. Thank you, David.
Any other questions from members? Paul?
Thank you, Chair. It was really to say this, I've noticed that this covers the financial year 2021, and I can see that on Exhibit 3, the receipt date of claims spanned 12 months, well, 11 months anyway. I'm just wondering if we're for 21-2, what the position is, whether we're okay in terms of all the claims having been submitted, just as it were, bringing it up to date. Thank you.
I don't know who's best to respond to that.
Well, 21-22 claims won't be due yet. So most of them are due in the autumn. David might correct me on different ones because there are some new ones in there about the pool schemes. I mean, the issue with the late claims last year, and I'm sure David would agree with me that both my technical section, Revs and Bens, and Audit Wales are under huge pressure during COVID, and you'll have seen that through the reports on the varying dates of when we've been able to produce the statement of accounts, which unfortunately has gone backwards over the last couple of years through work pressures. So I'm aware of these new grants that we had to cope with. So it is always an area of pressure for us to get these all done in time. And a lot depends, it's the same people who are producing the statement of accounts, who are producing the information for the NNDR, for example. They also produce information for us for the statement of accounts. So it's the same individuals, and obviously everyone has to respond to audit queries. So the longer that the audit goes on, again, it's staff resources. So I'm not aware of any issues. The particular issue around pool scheme, we've actually worked on. We recognise that didn't work well last year as far as timing was concerned, and providing all the information in a timely fashion, which I think David has politely a little bit more stronger on that. We recognize that we didn't provide that information in a timely fashion, and we've worked with the team this year to make sure that the people are available at the right time to provide that information to Audit Wales, because with anything that ourselves and Audit Wales work together on, that it just has a knock-on effect on everything, because it's the same teams that are working on everything. So it's important that we do meet our deadlines, and I'm aware of that, and we'll endeavour to do so this year. David, I don't know whether you want to add anything on.
Yeah, I'd just like to endorse those sentiments, Steve. We continue to work closely with yourself and your officers in terms of managing sort of the administration of the grants and factoring the work undertaken to certify the individual claims against, quite severe at times sort of resourcing pressures. And of course, we've got the audit of the council's main financial accounts coming up, over the next month. So yeah, we continue to work closely together to get this work undertaken as efficiently and as effectively as we can.
Thank you. Can I just ask a question myself? I think it's for David, really, but on page 4 of your report, which is page 54 in the pack, it's just in the summary. It says one of the 7 claims were qualified. That obviously referring to housing benefit subsidy. And it says this is a lower qualification rate than the long-term Welsh average of 1.4. It was just that last bit. I'm not quite sure what that means. The long-term Welsh average of 1.4.
It's probably just a benchmark, Chair. We try to look at the level of qualifications which occur at local authorities across Wales and use it as a gauge to where individual councils may sit. Clearly, the level of grant certification work has been reducing generally across the board over the last 4 to 5 years, albeit we did have an increase of 3 pool budget claims this year. But it's a benchmark, I suppose. But the main message from this report is that that detailed in paragraph 3 of that page, where we state that the authority has adequate arrangements for preparing its grants and returns and supportification of the work. So that should provide some comfort to members of the committee.
Yes, thank you for that, David. That's useful. And that's quite reassuring as well that you've had it's not a systematic error, and that there's been a good response to it. Any other questions from members before we move on to the next item? No? Okay. The recommendation is that the committee considers the content of the Audit Wales report. Have someone to move that? Mervyn Elwood Williams, first answer, and seconded by Ellie Chard. Yeah, all in favour? Thank you. Thank you very much. I should say thank you, Audit Wales, for their work in that, and also I should have said that for the other item as well, the previous item as well. We welcome the work there. I think, members, just looking ahead for the rest of the this morning's agenda, we'll now take the next item, and then which is the RIPA annual report. Then I noticed, I don't know if the officers have done this on purpose, but there's a great big gap shown in the agenda there. So I think a big space there. So that would be good to have a comfort break there. But so we'll have this next item. Then we'll have a short break, and then we'll go on to the statement of accounts, the draft statement of accounts. So the RIPA annual report. So Gary, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. For the benefit of anyone who doesn't know what RIPA stands for, it's the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000, which gave powers to certain public bodies, primarily the police and the security services, but also local authorities, to conduct surveillance activity. It sounds a bit more exciting than it actually is. The two main types of surveillance that the Act authorises is directed surveillance, which is effectively covert surveillance conducted in such a way that it's likely to produce information relating to somebody's private life, and it relates to a specific operation or investigation. And a covert human intelligence source, which is a person who establishes or maintains a relationship for the covert purpose of obtaining or disclosing information. We are required to have a policy which is set out in the appendix, and we're required to have a system of authorization in respect of how we manage surveillance activity. To cut to the chase, we haven't done any since the last time we reported on this, and I don't think we've done any in the previous period either. That's because we're obliged to take all possible steps to avoid intruding to people's private life or conducting covert surveillance. And as well, in the last couple of periods, we've had COVID, which has had an impact on activity. The way in which we conduct or are authorized to conduct surveillance activity has changed since 2012. The Protection of Freedoms Act removed some of the grounds that were available to local authorities, so we can only authorize surveillance on the basis that it's necessary for the prevention or detection of crime or disorder. And if it's for the prevention or detection of crime, it's got to relate to an offence which would have a maximum sentence of at least 6 months imprisonment. So that very much narrowed down the sort of field of activity. The primary areas where we would conduct activity for directed surveillance would be things like underage sales. You send a young person into a premises to do a test purchase, but there will be an officer for health and safety reasons who will already be in the premises sort of posing as a customer, and that's been in the guidance deemed to amount to surveillance. So we would authorize that activity under this. And the other area would be with fly tipping, where we might set up covert cameras in sort of particular fly tipping hotspots, in order to catch any activity. Any authorization has to be the subject of an application to a senior officer, and only members of the corporate executive team are authorized to grant permission. There's a detailed application form which has to set out the purpose of the surveillance, the equipment that's going to be used, the capability of the equipment, the potential for any collateral intrusion into the private information of third parties, and why it is that we can't find this information out by other means. That's not the end of the story. If we authorize it, we then have to go to a magistrate and get a magistrate to approve it before we can conduct the activity. As I said, the two main areas would be fly tipping and underage sales. We don't, whilst we have the power to authorize covert human intelligence sources, or CHIS for short, the policy will say that only the chief executive can authorize that, and that if anybody's thinking about it, doing it, they should seek advice from the legal service. That advice will always be, don't do it. The regulations that accompany the Act in terms of CHIS require a handler and a controller and all sorts of stuff that's really designed for the police and security services. So we've never authorized a CHIS, and we probably never will. But the other assurance you get is that we're inspected on a basis, on a frequency to be determined by the Investigatory Powers Commissioner. The last inspection was last year, February, March, and that was a desktop exercise effectively, where the inspector looked at our policies, looked at our training materials, looked at any authorizations which we'd done, which we hadn't had in that period, and they were satisfied with the material. They just made one slight suggestion for improvement, which was about the use of people's social networking sites to obtain information, because whilst you would think that that's information people have put in the public domain, they do have an expectation to a certain account of privacy. So there's guidance there about the repeated use of people's online profiles to obtain information. They also were happy with the training materials we use. We don't use external training providers. We run that training course internally, and we'll be running it again this autumn as a refresher for people who are involved in surveillance activity and for any new members of the corporate executive team who might be asked to authorise. That's it in a nutshell, Chair.
Thank you, Gary. Any questions from members or observations? Nigel?
Just a quick one from me, Gary, going back to the issue of fraud. Is surveillance ever used, or potentially could it be used, in relation to the investigation of fraud of the council? Thanks.
Potentially it could be. You could, for example, if a fraud involved where people were living, or whether they were working, etc., then that it does have the potential to be used there. But we have all sorts of other ways of finding that information out, and we would be expected to exhaust all other avenues to investigate those things before we were allowed to use surveillance. So there's a lot of data matching that goes on, and actually a lot of the fraud that comes up is as a result of data matching. So it would be highly unusual for us to have somebody sat in a vehicle watching somebody's premises or their activities. So we would have done it a few years ago, but we don't we could if we had a case that required it, but we would be expected to try and use all other techniques for finding information out before we resorted to surveillance. So by and large, we don't need to do it.
Okay, Nigel? No? Any other questions? Just one from myself, Gary, really. You mentioned the training, the refresher training that's going to take place. I know you said it's going to be from other new officers on the CET, so they're aware of it as well, which is good. And you say, although we have virtually no authorised covert surveillance taking place, and they said the only area that could, you tend to think that fly tipping and underage sales and so on, presumably there could be a risk that somebody decides that they do undertake surveillance and they're ignorant of these requirements. So they're not willfully disregarding them, they're just not aware of them. So I take it that when people will be invited to come on the refresher training, it'll be with that just to make people across the council aware of that requirement.
We have a working group that meets once a year of officers who are involved in investigatory work, and they identify the staff that need to receive the training. So there shouldn't be anybody running around doing surveillance as part of any investigation that they wouldn't know about. As I said, whilst we talk about fly tipping and underage sales, that's the most typical thing that we would be involved in. We have the power to undertake that surveillance for any offence that we would be the prosecuting authority for if the sentence was at least 6 months or more. So trading standards, and in the past, trading standards have used concealed cameras at markets and other things. But generally, following the Protection of Freedoms Act, the push was that we should more and more do overt activity and engagement rather than covert surveillance. But we can do it if absolutely necessary.
Thank you. No other points? The recommendation is that the committee receives and acknowledges the report and provides any comments in respect of its contents and the attached policy documents. Can I have someone to move that we accept that, please? Ellie Chard, and someone to second it? Paul Witham. All in favour? Thank you very much. The next item is item 9, update on the draft statement of accounts. As I said, I think we'll have a quick break now. It's I make it 10:43, so if we're back here in 10 minutes time, is that all right, everyone? Thank you. I'll see you in 10 minutes time. 7 minutes to. We all ready to start again? Thank you. Agenda item 9, the update on the draft statement of accounts, and we're being asked to note the position as presented in the draft accounts. I think it's presumably going to be delivered. Steve, is that right? Or is Gwyneth going to?
Gwyneth, do you want to say a few words? Or
I'll say a few words, Steve, but it'll just be very quick and passing it on to you. Diolch Gadeirydd. Adroddiad ydy hon sy'n diweddaru ar y fersiwn drafft o'r datganiad cyfrifon am 2021-22 sydd bellach wedi ei hyrwyddo gan y swyddog ariannol cyfrifol. A mae'r adroddiad yn sôn am y broses sy'n sail i'r datganiad hwn. Mae'n dyletswydd statudol ar y cyngor i baratoi datganiad cyfrifon, ac mae'r datganiad wedi gwblhau erbyn hyn heblaw am archwiliadau statudol. Mae'r pwyllgor yma yn rhan o'r archwilio statudol yna. Mae'r un peth i nodi ydy fod y dyddiadau cau ar gyfer y datganiad drafft a'r datganiad wedi ei archwilio wedi ei hymestyn am resymau mae Steve wedi sôn amdanyn nhw yn flaenorol. Ond dwi'n meddwl yn bod ni'n hyderus ar hyn o bryd bod ni'n mynd i gyfarfod y dyddiadau newydd. Ac ar y nodyn yna, mi drosglwydda i Steve i fanylu ar yr adroddiad. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you, Gwyneth.
Diolch, Gwyneth. Yes, so just the reason, sorry, can everyone hear me? Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, Steve.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, just checking that everyone could hear me, sorry. Yeah, so the point of bringing it to the Governance and Audit Committee is that you have delegated responsibility to receive these accounts. In some councils, it's full council. In some councils, it's the executive. But it's deemed, I think, for a long while now, that the Governance and Audit Committee received this report. So what we do is present the draft accounts to you. It's, as you can see, it's a massive document. You know, for you to properly scrutinise it takes time, and so we produce a draft accounts, which we do anyway for audit purposes. That's what they audit as a draft accounts, but we present it to yourselves so that you'll have time to review it. And what I would ask is that if you do have any detailed questions, you know, I'm unlikely to know all the answers offhand. I have a team of technical accountants who work on the various different elements and are expert in their field on their their particular notes. So obviously I can answer general questions, but if you do have any questions after this meeting, please feel free to email me or contact me. I will respond direct, but I will also, as long as if the individual is happy, I will report back to the Governance and Audit Committee when we bring the final accounts, just a summary of what queries we've had. So that offers there for everyone to if you contact me, then I will get a detailed response for you on any of the detail contained in the accounts. So going on to the process, obviously you've seen that the headlines are in 4.1, starting on page 101 in the cover report. So we signed the draft accounts on the 27th of June, an improvement from last year, which was the 2nd of August. Those, the delays were largely related to COVID. Last year, we also had the complication of it being our first year of bringing in the DLL accounts. So we had to produce group accounts for the first time. So that also added a delay into the process. It's also important to note that the draft accounts are now available. They've been available for a couple of weeks, or a week or so now, from the 15th of July to the 11th of August. They're publicly available. Notices are put up in County Hall, etc., to highlight that. And that's for any member of the public to ask any questions on it as well. We don't often have questions on it. I will state that. When we do, they are very detailed, and they can take quite a lot of time, quite rightly, and we welcome any questions. But there's quite a number of years we don't have any, and then we'll have a couple of years where there's usually a particular interest in some aspect that's happened in the council generally, rather than the accounts themselves. But so that's open. So I will report back again to the Governance and Audit Committee when we bring the final accounts to any issues that were raised by the public as well. So 4.2 largely talks to what Gwyneth was mentioning. So there's a table there that shows what is termed the statutory deadlines, which are the targets. That's what historically we've been working to. So the draft accounts for the 31st of May and audited statement of accounts by 31st of July. We got quite close. Some Welsh authorities had actually achieved that before COVID. COVID and staffing issues and possibly a slight rethink have made those deadlines, well, I'm not sure whether they're going to be stuck to in the long term, to be honest. It's a watching brief, really. But what Welsh Government have done, and I've just, what's in there, in the quotes there, is the notice that was put out by ourselves to publicly say that we are not going to meet those statutory deadlines. However, we are going to we commit to meeting the extended deadlines that Welsh Government have allowed us. Although it's a bit of a strange terminology with statutory deadlines, the actual deadlines are those extended deadlines. So we are still within Welsh Government guidance and legal deadlines, if you like. But they haven't rescinded those statutory deadlines. That's still on the statute book to meet those, but they have allowed us formally extended those deadlines to those dates, 31st of August for the draft and 30th of November for the final. So obviously we've met the extended deadline, and more importantly, I think for myself, is the practical deadline for me this year was to make sure you had these draft accounts before the recess, so that you had time to review them. And I think that's important to give you that time to do so. So it does say there, this was written a number of weeks ago now, because it has to obviously fit in with the committee deadline. I think we did still hope to have the final accounts coming to the September Governance and Audit Committee, but I think that might not be achievable now, and I think I'll bring in David just after I've given my introduction to perhaps update you on that issue. There are two aspects to that. One, David will explain from Audit Wales, and then the second one is slightly related to the note on 4.3, just at the top of page 103 in your pack. And this is an issue that I've reported in the statement of accounts in the narrative element there. You can read it there, I won't read it out to you. But essentially it's because of the inflation and the unprecedented level of inflation, the view has been taken by regulatory bodies, Audit Wales, that that it is likely that our asset values that are based on replacement cost are too low in the statement of accounts, because where we do a revaluation in a 20, we do a quarter of our assets a year. So if an asset hasn't been revalued for 4 years, with this amount of inflation, the question is actually, are those values materially correct? Materiality is, I can't remember the figure, but it's just shy of 4 million, I think, isn't it, David, this year? It's around that figure. So it doesn't impact any of the management accounts. It doesn't impact the council financially. We never borrow against assets, so it doesn't impact any of that. But it is a correct question to ask. Our decision this year has been, for the draft accounts, we didn't make any adjustments, and that was because there was a lack of clarity on what Audit Wales would accept as an acceptable adjustment to avoid them qualifying our accounts. And that was largely due to Audit Wales produced a draft guidance, and then CYMRU, which is CYMRU is my accountancy body, their public sector accountants body, they raised some issues with that guidance. So we weren't sure. What we didn't want to do is lots of work for the draft accounts that actually wasn't going to satisfy Audit Wales, and we'd have to redo it all for the final accounts. So we decided to produce the draft accounts for this deadline, which we were able to do. We recognised for next year, we will have to, in all likelihood, do a full revaluation of all our assets, which is a huge task. And we want to crack on with that, because it is a large task that we're going to have to undertake. As I say, we have been doing it in a phased approach, and that was okay while inflation was 2%, that sort of level. Now we seem to have high inflation again. I think Audit Wales will be requiring us to do a full revaluation. However, for the 21-22 accounts, Audit Wales have helpfully produced final guidance now, which we're working through, and we're hoping in the next couple of days to go to Audit Wales with a proposal of some adjustments that we will make to those values. It won't be a full revaluation, because we haven't got time to do a full revaluation, but that it will be, we will adjust those accounts to take those values to take account of inflation. So we just need to, we'll work through that with Audit Wales. So that's changed slightly to the note that's in the accounts, because I haven't mentioned what extra work we might or might not do for the 21-22 accounts. But yeah, as I say, they have produced final guidance now, and we are working through it, and we think there's a practical way that we can get that done over the summer. So that's where we're up to with that, and I'm sure David might want to touch on that. So just before I pass over to David, just on the statement of accounts themselves, as I said, please feel free to send any detailed questions with me. I'll try and answer any questions today as well, but if I can't, I will come back to you with the answers. Page 106 gives a good sort of summary of what's in there. I know some of you might be it's a huge document, huge amount of numbers, some of which make logical sense, and I fully accept that some of them are sort of notional accounting issues that have to be reported, but are quite technical, I suppose, and so for the lay reader, I think the important elements in the accounts, ones that you'd be particularly interested, the narrative report gives a good summary of the activity of the council in the year. There's some important links in there as well. There's links to the final outturn report, which gives you the report on the management accounts, so actually how we've performed against the budget. Obviously, the statement of accounts is about the actual cash. It's about how we've the numbers rather than our financial performance. So we've linked in with the as I say, the final outturn report, which is the management account side. We've also linked into the performance report that has come here as well. So you've seen the performance report. There's a link to the version that was available at the time in the narrative report, and I report any issues there that I think might impact the future. So it mentions what we're doing with the corporate plan. It mentions this issue about assets, etc. So it just gives a good summary. So it's for others to judge whether it's a good summary. It's a summary, let's put it that way. And then if you go down section 3, these are the key financial statements. Some of them are quite complicated. The cash flow statement, well, it's very technical and we need to do it. I'm not, whether it gives you information about the councillors for yourself to judge. I think one of the key ones that people look at is movement in reserves. It's quite a forward statement. It lists all the reserves, all the movements in the year, all the movements the year before, and that's quite a good starting point. And that is linked in with the final outturn report as well. Just to highlight that also on section 4 is the information on the HRA account, so that's listed separately. So we do separate statements for them. And we also do group accounts now, which is in section 5. So that's when we bring in DLL, Denbighshire Leisure Limited accounts. They are based on their draft accounts, but we aren't aware of any material issues from their audit. So we're comfortable with the draft accounts to be used in this statement. And just the final one to point out is when Bob brought the annual governance statement, we emphasize the importance of getting that right. It does form an important part of the statement of accounts as well. So that's reproduced here. And that's why, that's the point of doing that annual governance statement. So that's another key document that's included in the statement of accounts. And I think I'll probably leave it there. And David, I don't know whether you want to come in on any of those issues around timetabling and things like that.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I will do if that's okay. Yeah, clearly Steve's referred to a few issues which are ongoing and which we're considering and working through at the moment. So all credit to Steve and his finance team. They've produced from the initial review what looks like a good set of accounts, but clearly there are audit considerations around asset valuations which we need to consider and work through with Steve and his team. And we have produced various bits of guidance over the past few months which we've shared with Steve, and Steve is considering those and to come back to us with his preferred choice of dealing with that issue, really. And the crux of that is around those assets which are influenced by inflation and economic instability. We've seen recent reports over the past 12 to 18 months of inflation rising, costs of building materials increasing rapidly, and we need to be sure that those assets which are impacted by those increasing costs are fairly stated at the 31st of March. So we're going to need to undertake some further, more detailed work on those assets to be able to provide assurance over them. So that's a big issue which will take time for the council to work through initially, and it will also take some time for us to work through and consider the outcomes from that work. And we'll work closely with Steve and his team over the coming weeks in doing that. So that's an additional audit risk effectively which we need to consider and to deal with. Alongside that, we are facing sort of internal resourcing challenges as well. We have a number of audits going on across North Wales local authority sites at the same time, and we need to be able to balance those resources effectively and efficiently in dealing with the audit work that we need to undertake, and also this new asset valuation work as well, which will add additional work at each site effectively. So while our preferred option was to come to the September Governance Audit Committee with our audit report to present to you, it is in all likelihood looking like we will not have the capacity and the time to fully deliver the audit effectively by the end of August to allow us to report to the September Governance Committee. Whilst the audit is ongoing at the moment, it is likely that we will need to come to the November committee, which will still be within the statutory deadlines, flexibility with the Welsh Government audit regulations, and we will look to do that over the coming weeks, working closely with Steve and his team to gauge progress and to understand how quickly we can complete the audit work, whilst also giving Steve and his team a chance to process any audit adjustments arising from the asset valuations work as well. So that's a fairly high summary of where we are with the audit and the particular issues we're facing, Chair.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, David, for sharing that. I will throw I will throw it open to members to ask any questions that they've got. I think, Steve, you did say you're willing to take questions on the nuts and bolts issues now. If that's okay, I've certainly got some. But I think before we do that, before I throw it open to the rest of the members, I think it's important to say that and we acknowledge that the accounts, this is just a draft set of accounts and it's still subject to audit, has just been outlined, and there might be changes between now and the end of September. But I think it's fair to say that what we see in front of us is a very complicated document. And I think that demonstrates the something that we can easily take for granted, which is the expertise and the professionalism and the hard work that goes into preparing these, especially as it seems to be likely that you're not going to need all of the extended time that we could do this. That's good. So any questions that I ask on nuts and bolts, it's probably me trying to understand it. And I think it needs to be seen in the context of what I've just said. I think in some other cases, I just want to know the story that's being told by the accounts as well. So before I come to my own questions personally, I've got other members, if you'd like to indicate if you've got any questions in the normal way by raising your hand. Ellie Chard.
Yeah, and thank you, Chair. But basically, Steve, on page 39/144, I've just got an amendment, and thank you for the reports, everybody. On the voluntary aided and voluntary controlled schools, it should read diocese with the S and not diocese. I'm just a bit finicky about that, only because I was employed by one of the dioceses in the schools. So it's diocese, so it's an S at the end, and apologies about that. But
No,
I thought
could you just give me the reference, page number reference again?
Yeah, it's well, it's 144, or yeah, 144
of the pack, yeah.
Yes. Okay, so it just needs an S at the end. Okay.
I'm surprised audit haven't picked up on that already. I'm only joking.
Well, there you go. Thank you very much. I can understand most things, and it's very, and I realised about the cost of living and the inflation. So it was good to hear about that today. Okay, it's good to know that it's all being thought about. Thank you.
Anything else, Ellie? Was there two things, or were there two things, or was that it? Okay, thank you. Members, any other points? I know Paul, sorry.
a lot of work gone into it, and well done for getting it to this stage at this time. It was really question that I picked up on page 194, when in the notes you talk about investment properties. Is it unfair to say that they could be speculative? If I may use that word in a local authority context.
Yeah, just getting your reference, sorry. Yeah, investment properties. Yeah, we don't actually have any investment properties as such. If you're thinking about us borrowing, for example, to invest in a shopping centre somewhere or things like that. The PWLB, which is the place where we would go to borrow, the Public Works Loans Board, they introduced some stricter rules around this, around what you can borrow the money for, and they explicitly, you can't borrow to purchase investment properties. We never have. I think there's elements where that within that rule there are guidance around what they're trying to stop is exactly what you're saying, Paul, is councils gambling with council taxpayers' money. Now, we do have properties that will increase in value and that we might sell at a later date at a profit in inverted commas, but that's not the purpose of us owning that asset. So an example would be, for example, us building the SC2. I know that DLL run it, but it's still our asset. We own that asset, and it's rented out at a peppercorn rent to DLL. So it's our asset. Now it could be that we borrowed money to build that. We didn't borrow that money in expectation of a return. We borrowed that money to regenerate RHEOL. And that is within the rules of the PWLB. So I don't think we have any speculative investment properties at all within our portfolio of the nature that you'd worry whether, that you would lose money on. We own properties for purposes to deliver our services, not in any expectation of a gain on them.
Thank you for clarifying, and thank you for that assurance. It's good to hear.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any more questions from members? Nigel?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Steve, for a very comprehensive report. I'm mindful you said don't get into the nitty-gritty, try and deal with them outside the meeting. So I anticipate a couple of questions outside of the meeting. Can I just clarify page 128 on my listing of the balance sheet? There is a figure in there for March 21 for council dwellings at 94, then increasing March 22 to 139. You can spot those figures. Statement of accounts, balance sheet. I'm on page 129. Steve, you're on mute.
Sorry, yeah, 129. Which, sorry, can you just
the council dwellings 94,977 up to 139,074.
Yeah.
Can you just confirm, is that the increase in following a revaluation of property that contributed to that figure?
Yes.
Okay. I'm mindful of the expectation that.
Well, sorry, I suppose we are in properties as well. So we have a policy of right have been sold if the policy on council houses.
Steve, can you? I'm sorry, Chair. It might be my end, but I have lost Steve for a a moment.
Can you hear
on
me
that
now?
red line. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah.
Steve, I'm told you might be best to put your camera off.
I will. There you go. It's always better to have my camera off anyway. So,
Sing your
yeah.
face, but
Yeah, so we do have a policy of purchasing council dwellings. We also have a building scheme, a building programme. We have bought a number of council properties over the last number of years, and what we try to do is, if a property comes on the market and it's part of a line of council dwellings, we will buy that back if it's in good condition and we think we can repurpose it. And obviously that's part of the HRA strategy, and that's been agreed as part of the wider homelessness and housing strategy. So yeah, so some of that will also be purchases, but the vast majority will be just revaluations.
Okay. I'm mindful of your reference to the requirement to review assets generally and revalue assets that you were talking about earlier in the introduction. What is the potential impact on that in terms of your departmental workforce, and what's your current level of staff shortage, if any, that might be impacted by that exercise in the coming 12 to 18 months? Because as you said, it's a significant exercise. I'm just wondering how you're going to resource it, and what you anticipate as sort of the major challenge for you in delivering on that.
Okay, we have started planning. So obviously we're hoping that the actual adjustment that needs to be done to these accounts will mainly the burden will mainly lie on the finance staff, right? Because we're not revaluing, we'll be adjusting the values, but the actual full revaluation that we need to take place it is in the valuation in the States team, and we've just recruited 2 new staff. One of those is a replacement for someone who was on temporary, not temporary retirement, what's the word? Can't remember the word now.
Flexible retirement.
Flexible retirement, thank you, Gary. Yeah, so they were on reduced hours, and we've managed to replace that at full time, and we've also recruited someone else as well. That is to some extent part of the wider workload that valuation estates are seeing. Some of that is to do with what I was just talking about. All purchases, for example, need valuation estates to get involved. There's a huge number of leases that they manage, all the DLL leases, they need to agree those. So there is a big workload for that team. It comes under me as well as finance and property at the moment, so that's under me. So we have got 3 people ready, or almost ready, will be ready in September, and hopefully the hope is that 21-22's adjustments will have been done at very latest by mid-September to allow David and his team to then audit those adjustments. We're aiming for sooner than that, but that would be the latest. And then that team of 3 have a time schedule that they will complete the revaluation work by around Christmas time. Now, obviously, that gives us a month or so of delay if we would still be able to produce the information for the statement of accounts, but that's their target at the moment, and that's what they're planning towards. It is tight and there are resource issues, but we're hopeful. As far as the accountancy team, we do have a number of issues in the accountancy team. Again, it's linked to decisions that people making during COVID, people retiring earlier than we thought that they possibly would. And why wouldn't you? If you can, there's no good luck to them. That's great news for them personally, but it has impacted us as a service. So we have recruited in the capital and technical team. We now have 2 new people who've been recruited for capital, and they are coming at it new, and that obviously takes resources to get them up and running. So there are resource issues. I won't deny that, and I'll mention that's part of the thing we've mentioned in the Treasury Management report as well. But we have recruited. We haven't. There was a fear that we would struggle to recruit, for these posts, and I think David has some issues in Audit Wales that just struggling to recruit to staff, and we have in other areas of the council. Actually, we have managed to recruit 2 quality people, but it will take time for them to get up to speed with everything. One of them doesn't start till the 1st of August. One of them started at the beginning of July. So they've only been here a matter of weeks, and one of them hasn't started yet. So, but we're hoping by the autumn we'll have a full complement of staff.
Thank you, Steve. I think it's important if you hark back to the comments I made towards the start of this meeting about workforce planning, that the speed of the rollout of the new proposals for how the council wishes to structure its workforce are implemented at pace. Because I remain concerned that there are significant challenges facing the council in terms of workload and complexity in the coming months, and that the message I put back to yourselves is to try and ensure that the implementation of those decisions are done sooner rather than later in terms of recruitment, because I can see some major bottlenecks happening from a GAC committee member perspective if that isn't the case, or you hit an unforeseen departure or a problem in recruiting to particular roles. So anything that you can do just to ensure that will provide greater reassurance to me as a GAC.
Any other questions from members? Okay, I've got a few myself, and they aren't nuts and bolts issues, Steve and David, but I think I'll ask them because A, for transparency, and also I'm aware that when it comes to September, it's my name that goes on the statement as well. So I've got a personal interest in asking some of these things. And as I said before, it's really me trying to get to understand them and to also just to find out the story that's being told, really. So again, please don't take it as being any, if it sounds a bit picky. Take it in the context, as I said before. I think there's a tremendous amount of good work done here, and I think it'll be recognised that. But what I wanted to ask first, I think it's probably both Steve and David, both of you really. In the last committee on the 8th of June, we were presented with Audit Wales's annual audit plan. And in respect to the financial statement, the audit of the financial statement, reference was made to the significant risk. And this was not just for Ddinbych, but it was, I think this is generic for all Welsh authorities, the significant risk of management overrides of controls, and that their work will especially focus on journal entries, adjustments, estimates and transactions outside of the normal course of business. Now, I'm sure if there is anything found there, that'll be reported to us in September. But I think, speaking for myself, I'd just like to know, is there anything from the work you've done so far that indicates that any of that might have happened? I hope I have the right answer to this one.
I'll pick this up, Chair, if that's okay. Yeah, you're right to refer back to that audit plan, and that is a useful document now as you work through the council's draft financial statements and follow the audit process through to completion. It's a standard risk, and it's a risk that's highlighted by international accounting standards, and it's one which is included in our annual audit plan on an annual basis, in fact. And it refers to those areas of the accounts, estimates, assumptions, judgments, where management could consider the accounting treatment. So we review that. We do a lot of substantive testing. We test income and expenditure. We look at the journals which are processed in the preparation of the accounts, and we feed back on those work areas as part of our annual audit report as well. But it's early days in the audit, but we haven't identified anything of that nature to date, Chair.
Thank you. That's reassuring. Thank you. On page 111, that's page 5 of the account. Sorry, page 111 in the pack. I think it's a question for Steve, really. That's page 5 of the accounts document. It's how we report our budget. It says in the second paragraph that, however, the council must produce its statement of accounts in a way that meets UK and international financial reporting requirements. Then it says, unfortunately, these requirements are highly complex and technical in nature. I couldn't agree more that they're highly complex and technical in nature. And I think our life would be a lot easier if they weren't. But I just wanted to bear in mind there's a public document and our signatures are going on it. I was just wondering if we use the word unfortunately there, is that us commenting on the British and international financial practices? I'd just be a little happy if we didn't have the word unfortunately there.
I would agree. I think the unfortunately refers to the consequence of them. So it's a sentence that comes after that's the unfortunate bit. So the impact of that complexity means that when you see, and this is the important thing of me referring back to the final outturn report, which is the management accounts, hopefully very straightforward to understand. Everyone understands the impact. If you overspend, it has an impact on the council. I have to fund that overspend somehow, and their final outturn explains all that. If you go into the, if you try to, for example, when we report in the statement of accounts, they're not in the same services that we report to council in our management structure. So you'll find it very hard to reconcile. There is a reconciliation there and you can follow it through, but it's not straightforward. And I think that's the unfortunate side effect of those things. But I completely agree that probably the unfortunately needs to be removed, and that second sentence needs to say,
perhaps use the word however rather than unfortunate, something like that. It just looks as though we're commenting.
No, I take that on board.
Unfortunately, we have to comply with British and international standards.
Yeah, well, it is very unfortunate. No, I completely agree. I take it.
Thank you. Page 112. Yeah, there's just that table on page 112. Bearing in mind this is a public document, is there any reason why the final position table on there doesn't include budget and variances for each service? I think it's elsewhere in the document, I think. I just wondered, it was just a suggestion, just to see if there's been any particular overspends there. Just wanted your views on that. I'm not requesting it, it was just a question.
I think the position we've taken is that that's why we link you to the final outturn report, which gives the full details of the budget position. So if you go through to the final outturn link, you'll have the budget, the outturn, the reasons for the overspend is all in that link. You know, that there's always a balance with the statement of accounts of how much extra we put in, and especially in the narrative report, which is probably the freest, in inverted commas, part of the statement of accounts, in the sense it's my summary of activity. But so, for example, there's a lot of talk around including more performance information in the narrative. Now, I'm not an expert on performance. I don't report on performance other than in my service area. So I've chosen to link to the full performance report that, as you saw when it came to Governance and Audit Committee, I think is probably almost as long as the statement of accounts. And that gives you full details. So I have consciously tried to keep the statement of accounts simple while including links to those additional documents that gives that additional information.
Fine, that's all right. Thank you. On page 117, there was reference made to the local authority trading company, Ddinbych Leisure, and you did mention this in your when you went through the document before, and I think you said there's I think that they've got a different audit timetable and different external audit arrangements, and I think you said there's nothing material known there. It was just a question that if there was something material that came out, which I understand would be after September, what would be the effect on these accounts of that? Well,
if yeah, the timetable, we agree with DLL, the timetable. We've agreed with Audit Wales that you know, as a minimum, the draft signed accounts from DLL is what we'll use for the group accounts. If we have the final accounts in time, we would make any material adjustments. So if they do, if their final accounts are signed off in September and there's a material difference, now don't forget that although it's a significant company, our materiality is a percentage of our turnover. So again, David, I can't remember the figure, sorry, but it's around 4 million, the materiality figure, that their figures would have to change significantly, because generally we make all the adjustments that Audit Wales come to us. If they come to us with an adjustment and we have time to change the accounts, we will change the accounts because we prefer to have a cleaner set of accounts. Obviously, if Audit Wales come to us, for example, at the beginning of November with something that they've spotted late on, we might not change the accounts and we would report that as an uncorrected misstatement. However, if it was material, we would change the accounts, because otherwise we have a qualified set of accounts. David wouldn't be able to sign and give it a clean bill of health as far as qualification is concerned. So but I guess what I'm saying is that it would have to be something hugely significant that happened with DLL, because actually, their gross spend is 14 million. So it would have to be a really significant error. What we do is we have monthly meetings with DLL in a contract management board, and we monitor the progress, not the detail, but we monitor the progress of their audit. And they would raise at that meeting any significant issues that they were identifying. At the moment, they are telling us that the audit hasn't picked up anything significant, but the final accounts actually haven't been signed yet. I think there are a few small elements that RSM, their auditors, are still looking at, but nothing of significance at the moment. So I think it's unlikely that event would occur.
Okay, thank you. You've talked quite a lot about asset valuations today, so I don't particularly want to go over that again. But just if there are any revaluations, what's the normal process for who approves them? I'm not talking about when it comes to external audits, but I mean, who approves for the council's own purposes, who would approve of any asset revaluations?
Essentially, it's the valuation and estates team, so they're qualified valuers, and they sign off the values as a professional valuer. Now, what we do as accountants who aren't specialists in valuations, we will obviously sense check them, because ultimately those values go in the statement of accounts, and as you say, Chair, I have to sign those accounts. So we do go through a process of sense checking them, and we would question anything that we thought looked odd, but essentially, it is a valuer's professional opinion on what the value of that particular asset is. And we buy back that service from the valuation estates team. If there wasn't that expertise, we would have to go externally and buy that in externally to get that independent valuation. Because if I was doing it, obviously there'd be, it needs to be a separate professional body that do that, that undertake that valuation.
Okay, thank you. On page 117, there's a paragraph entitled "Looking Ahead." So it's likely that local government funding settlements will fail to keep pace with inflationary pressures, etc., etc. Have I heard somewhere, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the Welsh government have there's going to be an indicative multi-year financial settlement to give a bit of
yeah, they've given, so when they announced last year's settlement, they gave us 2 years worth of indicative settlements. The next 2 years, around about the 2.5–3% level. Obviously, we don't, that's at all Wales level, so we don't know what our settlement would be, but generally we're round about the average. We're just below, usually about 0.2% below the average for settlements. We tend to be around that figure. Now, it's one of these things I do feel sorry for Welsh government finance people, because it's something we've been calling for years and years, is to have multi-year settlements. The 1 year, or the time that they decide to give us 3-year settlements, COVID stops, inflation rises, and we have a war in the east of Europe that makes inflation spiral out of control. Pay settlements are going to be well above what was envisaged at that point. So what we've been asking for the last, ever since I've been in a sort of a higher role within local government finance, actually what we're now doing is lobbying, saying, you know, that figure you gave us for the next 2 years, can you revise it, please, because you haven't given us enough. So I do feel sorry for Welsh Government. They've done what we've asked, but it just, the timing was really bad because, yeah, 3% is it's a huge real terms cut for local government now. All our costs are going up because it's not just our pay that is likely to go up. Obviously, we don't know what that settlement is, but obviously every other sector, all our suppliers, they're all experiencing those pay inflation, as well as the petrol inflation and everything else. We've talked about the building cost inflation. That's why it's what was good, manageable news last year, this year has put us in a difficult position.
Okay, thank you. That explains it well. Thank you. On page 125, on the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, again, it was just a story being told. I'm not suggesting anything wrong here for a moment, but for corporate and miscellaneous, in the middle there, it shows the there seems to be a reduction of income of 5.4 million there between the 2 years. It was 32,818 last year and 27.4 million for 32.8 million for 2021 and 27.4 million for 21-22. And also for finance and property, it shows an increase in gross expenditure. I just wondered what the story was there on those two. They stood out.
Yeah, I'll have to come back to you on the detail on them. Because as I said, there's lots of adjustments that go into these figures. They don't relate to the management accounts, but I can get you those two answers, Chair, if that's okay.
That's fine, thank you. And on the balance sheet, I've got a few queries on the balance sheet. I'm trying to be as quick as possible here, but there are, as I say, things I'd like to know. Sorry, the story that's being told. So there's the balance sheet on page 129. So when it comes to assets under construction, and this is part of long-term assets, of course, last year it was 9.5 million. Sorry, 2021 is 9.5 million, 2022 is 22.446 million. Why the significant increase there? Forgive me, I'm new to the Ddinbych Council. If there's an obvious reason for this.
Again, I'd have to look into which specific ones they relate to, but we've got a number of big building schemes that are halfway through. So Queen's Buildings, for example, the new waste depot, those sorts of things. So that's what that increase would be. So we have to, even though we haven't finished a scheme, we would have to include it in our balance sheet as an asset under construction. I can give you, I'll get you the full list of what they are.
Yeah, okay. Well, it just, yeah, I don't want a detailed list. I was just wondering why. If you,
it's one of those figures that will, for example, if during 21st Century Schools Band A, that figure would be even higher because we'd have had a number of schools half built. So that would be included as an asset under construction up and until that project has finished and it's signed off, and then it becomes part of our working assets. So up and until we can use an asset for what its purpose is, then it's classed as an asset under construction. So obviously Band A has largely finished, and we're ramping up for Band B. So it's likely over the coming years that assets under construction will increase again significantly. But I think the reason for this one in particular, the difference is the two big schemes that we've undertaken last financial year and going into this financial year, which is Queen's Buildings and the waste depot.
Okay, thank you. Further on down the balance sheet, under current liabilities, it's got, sorry, under current assets, short-term debtors have been an increase of about just under 14 million over the 2 years. I just wondered, is that a significant increase in short-term debtors and what the reason was?
I'd have to look at note 15. Through. Yeah, it looks, because it's not anything to do with the trade receivables, which is your normal stuff. It's other receivable amounts. I assume it's related to Welsh Government grants, etc. That sort of stuff. I can get you that answer as well.
Come back to me if there's anything different than that. Again, I was just making sure. It just struck me as to what it might be there. And lastly, on the balance sheet, on the underneath current liabilities, it's got provision for accumulated absences. What is that? Sorry.
This is one of these unfortunate IFRS accounting adjustments we have to do.
Yeah.
Could you just give me the page reference? Sorry, I've missed. I'm halfway down now. What was the page reference? Sorry.
Page 129 of the pack. Just page 23 of the accounts.
Yeah, no, 129 is fine. Let me just get it to make sure I'm saying the right thing. Yeah, so this relates to a number of years ago. Unfortunately, I can't remember the IFRS number. I'm sure David might remember. They changed the accounting guidance. It was way back in, it was before I was in Flintshire at the time, so it must have been early 2010, 2011, some sort of time like that. And they changed so that basically the principle is that if you're as an employee, if you have 30 days holiday, and for a year, and you've only taken 10 of them by the 31st of March, then technically we still owe you 20 days holiday. So if you 21st of March, we would owe you 20 days worth of pay. Now, that's a bit of a simplistic review of the calculation, because we have to take into account that actually everyone has different leave dates in the council. So our leave dates start on when your birthday is, basically, and that was to help smooth the rush for holidays in March and things like that. So it's spread all the way through the year, so every individual has their own leave year. So we have to factor that in, and then the calculation for teachers is even more complicated because it all depends when Easter sits, and there's this notional calculation we have to do. So yeah, it's related to you can understand the reason behind requiring it in. The practical, you know, we would never have to pay what the figure is, 3.2 million for staff, because we're not going to wind up as a council on the 31st of March 2022. That's never going to happen. You know, we're not a private company that can go bust overnight. Well, you know, fingers crossed.
I do understand it now. I just didn't know what it was, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so it's one of those annoying figures we have to put in.
My last query is on the cash flow statement on page 158 or page 52 of the statement of accounts. You've got it's halfway down the table at the top there. Is it the bad debt provision, which has gone down from 992,000 to 97,000? Just strikes me as a significant reduction. Again, I just wonder what the story was on that, the reason for it.
Yeah, again, I'll have to come back to you on the detail on that. I imagine it relates to the level of council tax debt that during COVID, we adjusted the council tax debt provision, and we adjusted a number of debt provisions to take account of the people being out of work, etc. The financial circumstances. Actually, the council tax has recovered remarkably last year. The council tax yield, actually how much cash we take in, has I have to say the council tax team have done, especially compared to other authorities in North Wales. Our recovery on it has been really good. We've worked really well. So down on that figure as well.
Okay, that's fine. Just perhaps you could come back to me if it's any different to what you've just.
Yeah. Okay.
had there. That's thank you. That's all my questions. Any other questions from members before we? Okay. The recommendation is on the statement of accounts to receive. Sorry, reading the wrong bit there. The recommendation is to note the position as presented in the draft accounts. Can I have a proposer for that? Someone to move it? Oh, sorry, Nigel's got his hand up. I beg your
Chair, I may need, or the committee may need guidance on this, but I was going to suggest either an amendment or a second recommendation, essentially to thank the head of finance and Proctor and his team for the collation and of this information and the presentation of the draft statement of accounts, because it is a significant effort, and I think committee should acknowledge that and ask Steve to pass those comments on, if committee is willing to support amend the recommendation, to pass them on to all the staff, Steve, that have contributed to the preparation of these papers. Perhaps through you, Chair, Gary might have an appropriate form of words that he would like to indicate on this matter.
Yes, Chair, I would say effectively that you could add a 3.2 to say that the committee wished to express their appreciation to the head of finance and property and all of the staff involved in the preparation of the statement of accounts, draft statement of accounts. Yeah, words to that effect.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, if you're happy with that, I'd be happy to.
I'm happy about that. I think just insert the word draft. I'm sure it's very good, but it is only a draft at the moment. It's subject to completion of the audit. So if we have a mover to accept the that we bear with me, sorry, a lot of words here. So a mover that we accept the report and respect of its contents and attached policy document. Sorry, that we note the position is presented, and also the second the words that Gary just put there. Can I have a mover for that, please? Ellie, and a seconder, please. Paul, thank you. All in favour? Thank you very much. We're making progress. The next item on the agenda is the annual Treasury Management report. And again, I think it's from Steve, who's going to talk through that. So over to you, Steve. Thank you.
Gwyneth, do you want to say, introduce? Are you happy for me to?
I'll say a few words, Steve, but again, you know, hardly anything. This is a lot of work for you, Steve. You're putting on a proper shift here, so I'd like to, you know, support what Nigel suggested for the last item, and not just for that item, but for everything. Very quick introduction then. Mae'r adroddiad yma'n darparu gwybodaeth am fenthygiadau, buddsoddiadau a llif arian y cyngor. Mae'n bwysig fod y Pwyllgor yn ymwybodol ac yn nodi perfformiad swyddogaeth rheoli trysorlys y cyngor a'i chydymffurfiaeth hefo'r dangosyddion darbodus gofynol. Mae atodiad 1 yn dangos y sefyllfa dros 2021 a 22, ac mae'r adroddiad hefyd yn cynnwys diweddariad ar y sefyllfa 2022-23 yn atodiad 2, ynghyd â manylion am yr hinsawdd economaidd ar hyn o bryd. Yn olaf, yn atodiad 3, mae yna asesiad effaith ar les, ac mae gofyn i'r Pwyllgor ystyried hynny hefyd. Ac felly mi wna i basio drosodd i Steve ar hynny. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Diolch, Gwyneth. I'm going to switch my camera off in case I warble on and you've lost me. So yes, so there's a cover report that starts on page 253. So I'll just highlight a few things on there. So since 2009, we've tasked this committee to scrutinise the Treasury management. Again, different councils doing it different ways, but this is what we've decided in Ddinbych. So the committee receives each year, well, twice yearly, an update, which is just a summary of performance, and then the annual Treasury management report. So as Gwyneth said today, you've got the year-to-date report, and you have the annual report for 21-22. So if you go over to the next page, there's just a good summary of what goes where. So you can see that the involvement of Cabinet and Council as well as this committee. So it's quite a comprehensive reporting structure around the Treasury management, because it is such an important part of what we do in finance and what the council does. On certain days, millions of pounds go in and out of our account. Obviously there's the usual making sure there's enough cash in to pay everyone, but we also have to make sure that we factor in for those big payments for capital schemes, and we have various regional adjustments that we do, pooled schemes, etc., that we need to make sure that we have funding for on any particular day. The broad so we've got the timetable. If you just look at 2.2.4, which is at the top of page 255, there's just a brief summary of the role of the committee. I will go through some of this in more detail in September when this is going to be part of the training, and I will also arrange for our Treasury Management Advisors, Arlene Close, to do a session with yourselves as well. We usually open that out to any members as well, because obviously the roles on Cabinet and Council as well, although in the past it's mainly been the Governance and Audit Committee that attend. So, but it is useful to hear that advice that we're getting from Arlene Close, the Treasury Management Advisors. Just finally on the sort of cover report, and this is very simplistic, but Treasury Management's role is to balance three things: liquidity, yield, and security. So what does that mean? Well, liquidity is around making sure that we have funding available on any particular day. So that's around making sure that we haven't got funds locked up that we couldn't access at short notice. So we make sure that we have enough funds to be able to do that. Some of that is done through borrowing. So we can borrow overnight from other local authorities, for example. So it's around making sure that we have cash in the bank. The yield is about, and this is less important for Ddinbych as we stand now, because we don't have huge investments. But that traditionally, it's obviously really important to make sure that where your money, you're maximising your return when you're investing your money. Now, as I said, we're not what you would call an investing authority. We put money into investments, in inverted commas, in the short to medium term to help with cash flow. So we might borrow in advance of need, and it's important that we still maximise the yield we get if we've borrowed early for some key expenditure. We did that, for example, at the beginning of COVID, when Welsh Government asked us to pay out all the business grants. So we had to fund £40 million worth of expenditure. So in the short term, we took out a loan to help cash flow that expectation, to make sure that we could deliver on that promise. And the final one is security. So I don't want to mention Icelandic banks or anything like that. Probably people might have forgotten about such things, but it is important that we make sure that our money is secure and in somewhere that's safe. you know, you can't, it's not never 100% safe, but that's obviously, so those are the three things that we have to consider. As I say, for us, it's around liquidity and security more than yield, only because the values that we have are to invest are lower. So Appendix 1 is the annual reports for 21-22. So I just want to highlight a couple of things in here, and the main one being on, if you look at 3.1, so that gives the borrowing activity for the year, and 4.3 gives us the investments for the year. Now, as I said, that 28.7 million isn't our cash that we've chosen to invest, and we can invest in anything we want. That's borrowing that we've undertaken before need. So that's why that's at 28.7 million. So it is an investment. We have put it back into a bank. So we are getting a return on it, but we have borrowed in ahead of need. So it's not that we have that to put wherever we want. The next key one is actually in Annex B to the report, which is there's lots of performance indicators around treasury management, but the key one that we think is the proper sort of gold standard performance indicator is there in 2.1, and that gives us a percentage of our net revenue stream that we're using to fund borrowing, essentially. So it's the capital financing budget as a percentage of our total net revenue. So it's currently standing at 7.16. It has bobbled around the 7% for a number of years. I will mention a bit later about our ambitions as a council around our assets, and we're doing a lot of work which has been slightly delayed due to the prolonged audits and things over recent years and COVID, but we are starting again to reinvigorate that debate about how ambitious do we want to be as a council as far as our asset plan. Now we've taken some decisions already, so you'll know the 4 million a year on highways. We've done some significant schemes, Queen's Buildings, SC2, with the waste project. A lot of these are part funded from Welsh Government or majority funded from Welsh Government, but they still need council funding as well. But there are a huge number of schemes out there that services, members want us to look at. Sorry, and the other key elements that we have approved already are things around the climate change, so the flooding resilience, the flooding schemes in the north of the county in particular, and the improving our buildings for making us more efficient. So that is spend that is for either regeneration purposes or for actually making our assets more resilient, and we can have a business case around those sorts of things. We've always thought that the non-HRA ratio that's there, the 7.16, we wouldn't want to go above 10%. That's sort of our our ballpark figure that we wouldn't want to increase. Now the borrowing goes up and down obviously over time. So if we didn't spend anything, if we didn't borrow anything, if we didn't spend anything on our assets for the next 5 years, the borrowing would slowly come down as the loans were repaid. Obviously that's unrealistic. We do want to still invest in our assets, and it's just getting that balance right. And that, we have that discussion every quarter with Arlen Close, and we will be having that discussion with Cabinet Council as well. in the coming months as to where we think that level of investment should be. But that's that core PI. On the top of page 267, I suppose the other sort of gold standard PI is actually at the beginning of the year we set limits of what our borrowing should be, and that takes account of where we think the capital program is for any particular year, and we set those limits based on our estimates of what our spend will be and our need will be. And obviously we make sure that the impact on that other PI is within safe limits as well. And you can see there that we're below those limits that we set at the beginning of the year. Onto Annex C. Oh, the other thing, yeah, Annex C, I was just going to point out very quickly, we do provide a glossary. And again, this will be a bit more of the training that I kind of hoped might have been done before this meeting, but will certainly be done before the next time this report comes to Governance and Audit Committee. But we do provide in each report that glossary for people. And then on to Appendix 2. So just a couple of things I wanted to point out. 6.2, the staffing changes. So I have touched on that already. What we've done is widen the pool for treasury management finance people, which allow us a bit more resilience. We have coped really well during COVID, everyone working from home. We've done, bank line is, all that sort of stuff that you do probably with your own home banking. Everything's worked fantastically well. But we did feel that we needed a bit more resilience with people having lost some people and having to recruit new people. We took the advantage to widen the pool of people who can undertake the treasury management duties. So we've done that. And the other thing, which I have already mentioned, I've mentioned it too early. 6.3 is just a note about that medium-term capital strategy work that I talked about, that we are committed to delivering in the autumn. So it is something that we will come back to Cabinet and Council with, to try and devise a longer term plan for capital spend and and balance that affordability and the requirements of our assets, and then our ambition, for linking in with the corporate plan that's due to be approved in October as well. So it needs to all link in together, that plan. So just to highlight that work is ongoing as well. Yeah, sorry, Chair, for taking so long. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve. Yeah. I think you say in the report then two page, you mentioned in your passing on page 253 that training is going to be provided by Arlen Close. I think looking at the report, I can be most welcome. Having said that, I find the report very informative, and thanks for going through it so well. Any questions from members? Steve, sorry, but you say that you make the comment that this activity is inherently risky, which it clearly is, and you've outlined how you do you minimize those risks as far as you possibly can, but there's always an inherent risk there. You mentioned that there's audits being carried out and so on during the year. Am I right in saying, and I should have done this myself, but is treasury management included in the council's risk register?
It's included in my service risk register. I can't remember actually whether it's in the corporate, whether it's a corporate risk. I'd have to check. Whether it's a specific risk, I'll double check.
What's the first bit you said? You said you're not sure if it's in the corporate risk register. You said something before that I didn't quite catch.
It's in my service risk
service
plan. It's included in my service plan.
Right. Okay.
Service risks.
Yeah.
I just need to double check whether it with
and presumably
Nicola Neal's team, whether it's in.
There's a sort of you talk about I think there's some staff changes, but there are a number of staff involved in transactions. So as far as any treasury management transactions are concerned, am I right in thinking it couldn't just be carried out or by one person. There'll be some separation of responsibilities operated in it.
That's right. Bob, it's included, the treasury management processes are included in the annual financial services, financial systems audit. So it's one of the key parts that that Bob audits every year. Bob's team comes and audit. So yeah, I can't just go on Bankline and approve a payment that I've set up. That there's from memory at least 3 people involved.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Nigel?
Thank you, Chair. Some questions for Steve, if I may. Steve, I endorse the Chair's comment about training before the next session. I think that'll be absolutely essential. Steve, how is Arlene Close Limited identified as the Council's advisor on what recruitment process was gone through in order to hat on that?
Yeah, we have a contract with them. There was a procurement process undertaken 2 years ago. I'm going to say it might be 3 years ago actually now. COVID sort of always adds 2 years to everything, doesn't it? It's and actually Arlene Close were the only ones who bid, unfortunately. So it is a market that hasn't got a huge amount of choice, but we do test the market regularly to make sure. We pay about £20,000 to them for their advice. They have so the core advice is that we meet them quarterly. They will answer any questions. They actually provide our treasury management system, Logotech, so they share that information, so they can give us live advice online. If we have any decisions to make, we can also contact them in between those meetings. So there's sort of set meetings every quarter, but we have a particular person who's our advisor that is contactable at any one point. They do provide as part of that contract the training. So that's part of that contract, that they have to provide the training to yourselves as part of that contract. And they also are invaluable. So for example, talking about the medium-term capital strategy, they have devised a model that allows us to put schemes in, do some scenario analysis to give us the impact on future years borrowing. So, and that PI that I was talking about, that percentage comes out of that sausage machine, if you like. So they helped us develop that. It's an Excel spreadsheet based model, but they helped us develop that. So they are invaluable. Obviously legally we have to have treasury management advisors, like we also have tax advisors. So we use PS tax for tax purposes, and again we go through procurement rules, and we go whatever the procurement rules are. If they've changed in between, we'll follow those new procurement rules. So it is done in an open way.
Yeah, thank you for that. Second question was around the medium-term positioning and medium-term capital strategy referred to in the document in particular. But can you just clarify for me the timeline that you think the medium-term financial strategy for the council supporting delivery of its corporate objectives is going to be? By what time period we're looking at for the respective documentation, Steve, at the moment?
Well, the plan that we're looking at is we're hoping it will be a 10-year plan, mainly because we have undertaken, well, mainly because it's good to plan for the long term anyway. If you compare it to housing stock business plan at the moment, which we produce as well, which is that's actually over 30 years, that, and we have to provide that over 30 years. I have to say, once you get into the 15th year, it's who knows what's going to happen in 15 years time. So we want it to be a practical strategy. The reason for choosing 10 years is largely around, we know what the ambition is out there. We've gone out to services, and it was obviously the previous lead members in the previous cabinet, and did a horizon scanning exercise. You know, what schemes do you think are out there that you would want to look at? That figure came in at 180 million. So first of all, we can't afford 180 million. Now, how do we deal with that ambition? One of the ways is that we know that a lot of that 180 million we'll be able to get Welsh Government funding for. But obviously, until we get that funding, it's just sort of a notional project that is being worked up. The other way to do it is to actually plan over a longer period. So we have that ambition. I'm not saying all of it, but we have that level of ambition, that sort of scale of ambition, but we do it over a longer period. But at least then services, people, residents, they know that we have that ambition and that we are planning to deliver it, rather than going from, you know, year to year or even corporate plan to corporate plan. We have a longer time period where we've got some key projects that we want to do. And it's worked well with 21st century schools, or I can't remember what it's called now. I can't remember what it's called. It's changed its name anyway, so apologies for that. But the Band B, you know, Band A, we delivered. It took time to deliver, but actually because we had a planned approach, we were one of the few authorities, or one of the authorities that delivered earliest on Band A. And we've got, you know, a dedicated team that delivers it, and I'm sure they'll do the same with Band B. And again, most of that is coming from Welsh Government funding, but our element isn't insignificant, around 20 million that we have to find as well to deliver those projects. But they've been done over a period of time. You know, we're not, if we were asked to build Band A and Band B schools all at once, that we couldn't have afforded it, but we can over a period of time.
Now that's helpful. It's also something I would pick up in due course with the head of internal audit about timescale planning to underpin, to allow or encourage the audit process to underpin planning that you've just gone through. Third issue from me was, if you look at the annual Treasury Management Report, Wellbeing Impact Assessment Report, sort of page 277 and on.
Yeah.
It's relatively easy to have a template against which you proof various reports and you add comments in, and try and you can almost default to a tick box culture. I'm not suggesting, Steve, that's happened on this report. But I think that some of the comments in there could strengthen the relationship between what Treasury Management does in terms of achieving corporate aims. Particularly, I was looking at the economy, skills and jobs references, where the economic development of the council's area as part of the wider region is important, and that we should try, in my view, to try and link all of our activity back to those key corporate criteria. And there is a lack of attempt, I think, to make a connection there in a way that we might have encouraged. For example, when looking at Treasury Management, whether investment in the local economy leads to an increase in job opportunities and therefore investment in the area as opposed to elsewhere is something that potentially there may be a Treasury Management link across to. And I just think it might be worth exploring. It's not an immediate, go away and amend the report idea for me. It's just a suggestion that we might be able to strengthen that. It might also enable a better scoring to result from the report when it is then assessed against sustainable development criteria and others, Steve, which is something for you to perhaps ponder upon away from the meeting.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. I will take those comments on board. Just as a general response, I think with finance reports, and we've had questions in the past. The wellbeing impact assessment is always difficult because the finance function, whether it be the council tax report or treasury management function, we're facilitating other services to do things. without good treasury management, without a budget that's robust and sound and balanced, services would suffer. But I don't want to fill in a wellbeing impact assessment that gives us 5 stars for everything, because actually the council wouldn't work without us, even though the pounds oil the wheels of every element of service delivery. So there's a balance there of trying to bring some of that in, of what we do enable, without claiming, over claiming, I suppose, or over including things that actually, we shouldn't. This is about treasury management. Without treasury management, we wouldn't be able to spend money on schools. Without proper treasury management, we wouldn't be able to spend money on regeneration, as you say. But yeah, it's a balance, and it's difficult. But I'll take your comments on board around and have a look at the economic side of it.
It's helpful, I think, and there's partly a political perspective that you'd expect from your council leadership. The ability to sell your wares as treasury management increases the awareness of the relevance of that within other sections that operate within the council outside of treasury management. So there's that bit, Steve, that I'm also saying that others across the council may not necessarily always relate to the importance of treasury management work into day-to-day business of the council, Steve.
Yeah, no, I take that. I will have a look. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Steve, for the answers. Yeah, just to echo that, I mean, I see that after going to this committee, I think this report does go to Cabinet, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So again, I think Nigel's point there is probably that I don't know if that same message gets there as well. I mean, we would be interested in treasury management, but I wouldn't want to think cabinet members just to think of it as something that goes on behind closed doors. It does have a massive impact, hopefully a beneficial impact as well. Gwyneth, I think you've got your hand up there.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to apologise because I'm afraid I really have to leave the meeting now, but just like to thank the committee for all the really great attention that you're paying these reports, and I'm sorry, but Steve will have to cope with the last item on his own, but I think you'll be okay with him.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your help.
So, thank you. Bye bye.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any more questions on this report from members? No. Right, okay. There's 3 recommendations there: that members note the performance of the council's treasury management function and its compliance with the required prudential indicators. That members note the treasury management update report, and that the committee confirms it is read, understood, and taken account of the wellbeing impact assessment in Appendix 3. Can I have someone to move that, please? Ellie, and someone to second it, please? Paul, all in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Okay, next item is the work programme, agenda item 11.
Yes, Chair, the work programme is there for you. As you can see, fairly well populated. We will make the change to the reference in November that Paul raised earlier on about the contingency report. And then it's just any other actions from today that would make any changes to that forward work programme.
Can I just raise just a couple of things, Gary, please? Just looking at the work programme that was agreed following the previous committee, there seems to be a couple of things dropped off it. Internal audit exceptions and exemptions, update on practice, and the annual whistleblowing report appear to have dropped off. And I think the whistleblowing report is now included in September's, but there was the 2, I think, the internal audit related reports there. Bob, sorry.
Yeah, apologies. There's been some sort of issues in service that we needed to resolve first. So they're about to appoint a new person in charge of procurement. So at that point, then we can do the exemptions and exceptions report and bring it back.
When you say in the service, in the procurement service, not your service.
Not our service, procurement service, yeah. So once that's been resolved, I mean, it's getting to the end now, and it is something that has been on for a while. And we have hoped it would have happened before the summer, but obviously it's dragged on a little bit. So hopefully, once that's been resolved, we'll carry out the contract management and the exceptions and exemptions follow-ups for November.
Thank you. And that was the change in the service. They were mentioned in the performance report at the last.
Yeah, effectively, I think we've had 5 or 6 recruitment exercises where we've failed to recruit. We're looking at a review of the current structure in order to fill that position.
Thank you. Nigel, got your hand up. And Paul, sorry. Nigel and Paul and Steve. Sorry.
Need to go, Chair?
Yes, Nigel.
Yeah. Essentially a question for Bob, really. Bob, I really do want to see a forward work programme looking forward. Running for the next couple of months or so isn't good enough for me in terms of horizon scanning. So in municipal year terms, I would expect the forward work programme to be through to next May, and the meetings scheduled accordingly, and the suggested listing of reports reflecting that. Otherwise, we are really working on a very short-term horizon.
I think Gary. Nigel,
yes, the forward work programme would have been prepared before the meeting schedule was approved by council. The meeting schedule for next year was approved by council. Was it last week? It was last week. So the next forward work programme will have dates through till the end of 2023.
Thank you, Chair. Manna to my ears.
Paul?
2 things, Chair. Just add to that, because this committee receives a number of annual reports, it was always felt that a 12-month rolling forward work programme would enable the full list, as it were, of annual reports coming up to be scheduled so that they don't all hit at the same time. The second point, and I suspect Steve's thinking of this, is that the September meeting as presented, the September forward work programme as presented has got the statement of accounts in, which will presumably be shifted to November. My question was whether that creates either a lighter agenda in September or a heavier agenda in November, and whether there needs to be a bit of swapping around to even them out. Thank you.
Yes, we can take a look at that as to whether anything is available to come earlier, or whether it causes a problem in November, but we'll speak to Steve and Bob and make those arrangements.
The other thing on the programme, as chair, do I have to produce an annual report for the council?
The committee does produce an annual report. What we've tended to do is to bring a draft report to you with, if you like, a summary of what's gone on with the previous year, and then we would ask the chair to come to council to present that. We can bring that in September, if you'd like to have that in September.
Would that be normal practice?
Normally we would have done, well, it's an election year, so it's not normal. Normally that would be done around May time, around the time of the annual meeting. The difficulty is that we stopped effectively our meeting processes from March. They've only sort of stepped up again after the election. So that's a draft report that we can bring to you. So it's a draft report.
You would, as officer, you draft a report on behalf of this.
Yeah, we
committee.
would bring you something in September to see if you're happy with it.
But when you say me, or you mean the committee? It's not me as chair.
No, we bring a report to the committee to say this is a summary of the committee's work over the previous period. Are you happy that it's an accurate summary? Sure. Clearly, not all members on the committee will have been. That's the trouble with election years. Not everybody on the committee will have been on the committee for that whole period, but we'll bring a summary. And then if the committee's happy with that, then we would ask you to present it to council.
On those who were on the committee before the elections. Steve, you had your hand. Steve, sorry, you had your hand up before. It seems to have gone down.
Yeah, sorry, Paul's covered it. He was right. It was just about the statement of accounts in September.
Sorry.
You.
Pardon? Oh, yeah, okay. The other item is, it's just an information report. Do we need to deal with that, or what's
Gwilym wants to mention anything, but it's there for your information effectively.
audit inquiries?
Do you want me to come in here?
Dave, sorry, Gwilym.
David, sorry, yeah. Steve?
Yeah, do you want me to come in? I'll introduce it. I don't know whether David wants to add anything after I've introduced it. So just to explain, this would be something that would normally come to the Governance and Audit Committee as a draft, and you would, as chair, approve it or not, as the case may be. Due to the timing and the fact that this relates to 21-22, the previous chair has approved it just before or just around the election time, so he approved it. We didn't think it was fair really for the new chair to look back at 21-22 and approve it. So we managed to get the previous chair to sign it in time before he relinquished his duties as chair formally, and we sent it to Audit Wales on the 6th of May. So it is for information. If I can go through the report to just highlight any changes, there are a smattering of changes that we made from last year, just to include things such as the contract work and things like that, mainly the sort of responses to audits. So we've updated it for that. We did engage with Gary and Bob as Chief Internal Auditor, just to check that they were happy with the response. So as I say, I'm happy to go through, but I know it's late on in the meeting and it is for information only, so it's I'll leave it there unless you want me to. David, do you want to add anything to that?
Only that it's standard practice. We issue this letter out to yourselves and those charged with governance every year, and the responses for the 21-22 financial year start at page 316. Thank you.
I don't think I've got any. It is, as you know, just an information report. Members, is there anything you want to raise? No. Oh, Paul, I beg your pardon.
Only a comment that perhaps for new members, it's worth, after this meeting, when you've recovered from the previous items, just having a quiet look at this, because it is a good overview of many of the issues that this committee has to address. And in a sense, it's a prelude to general training about the responsibilities of this committee. It touches on many of the areas that you'll come across then or be introduced to then. So it's good preliminary background meeting for that training. Thank you, Chair.
I agree. Thank you. I think we've got a recommendation. So no other hands up. The recommendation is that the committee, that we note the responses included in Appendix 2 to this report have been approved by the previous chair of the committee and submitted to the Audit Wales. Can I have a move? Can someone move that, Ellie, and seconded, please? All in favour? Thank you. I think that's everything. So thank you very much for all your contributions today. Thank you to all the officers for explaining things so well, for Audit Wales colleagues, and to all